Just a minute.
Sorry.
All right. Okay. Pete, you ready to go?
I'm ready.
All right. Okay, Calvin, let's go. Ready? All right. 7:33 p.m. Good evening, fellow commissioners and the general public. My name is Michael Champanis, and I'm the chair of the Transportation Advisory Commission. Before we begin, please note that this meeting is being recorded and will be uploaded to the county website and on YouTube. To conduct this meeting wholly electronically and to effectuate both the emergency procedures authorized by new state legislation and FOIA, the Transportation Advisory Commission needs to make certain findings and determinations for the record. If cumbersome, asking in advance for your patience. First, because each member of the commission is participating in this meeting from a separate location, we must verify that a quorum of members is participating, and each member's voice is clear, audible, and at an appropriate volume for all the other members. Ask that each of you pay close attention to ensure that you can hear each of your colleagues. Excuse me. I'm asking that each commission member participating in this meeting state your name and the location from which you're participating when I call your name. At large, Linda Sperling. Okay. Braddock District, Kevin Morse.
Burke.
Okay, I am here. Hunter Mill District is vacant. Commissioner Sitnick, Mason District.
No, Mount Vernon.
Mount Vernon District, but I am here in Mount Vernon District.
Well. Roger. It's Roger.
Yeah,
Okay. Roger.
Yeah, I'm here in Falls Church in Mason District.
Yes. Okay. All right. Okay, and the aforementioned Commissioner Sitnick is here from the Mount Vernon District. Thank you. Lead District vacant, Providence District. Commissioner Hancock.
Hi, Jeremy Hancock in Falls Church.
Okay. Springfield District, Commissioner Thiel.
Here in Springfield District.
All right. Sully District, Commissioner Skiles. And Fairfax Area Disability Services Board, Christy Garden. Do not believe it's going to be with us tonight. Checking. No, she's not. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right, we have a quorum. So at this point, I will pass the virtual gavel to Vice Chair Sitnick so that I may be heard to make the requisite motions.
Thank you. I accept the virtual gavel. I now recognize Commissioner Champanis.
Thank you. I move that we have determined that each member's voice can be adequately heard by each other member of the commission. It is so moved.
You have heard the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
It's seconded by Commissioner, who did that?
Thiel.
Thank you.
And also Morse, you had a double second.
Okay, thank you. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstention? Mr. Chairman, the motion is carried unanimously.
Thank you very much. I next move that the state of emergency caused by the COVID-19 pandemic makes it unsafe for this commission to physically assemble and unsafe for the public to physically attend any such meeting. I further move that this commission may conduct this meeting electronically through a dedicated audio conferencing line, and that the public may access this meeting by the Microsoft Teams online platform or by calling 1-571-429-5982 and entering the phone conference ID 915-367-261#. The phone number for ADA is 711. Access information is also available at the TAC website at the Fairfax County website. It is so moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, Commissioner, was that you, Kevin?
Yeah.
Thank you. Is there discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Mr. Chairman, the motion is carried unanimously.
Thank you very much. Finally, I move that all of the matters on the agenda previously furnished and posted on the TAC website are necessary for continuity in Fairfax County government and or are statutorily required or necessary to continue operations in the discharge of the Commission's lawful purposes, duties, and responsibilities.
You have heard the motion. Is there a second?
Your turn, Eric.
Second.
Thank you. That was Eric.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Mr. Chairman, the motion is carried unanimously.
Thank you very much. We'll now start the tax business per the approved agenda. So the first item on the agenda here is the acceptance of the previous meeting's minutes. They've been distributed previously by Calvin. Commissioner Morse did have an edit. I will entertain a motion to approve the meeting minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all right. So there, it has been moved and seconded to approve the minutes from the August meeting. Is there any discussion on the motion?
Is that a motion to approve them as amended?
As amended, yes.
Okay,
Yes.
fine.
Any discussion on the motion? Although the motion is to actually approve the meeting minutes, well, as amended, yes. Okay, fine. As edited by Commissioner Morse. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say nay. Okay, fantastic. The meeting minutes are approved. And so now we managed to work our way through the early activities as quickly as possible. Brian, very glad you could join us. Understand you've got a drop dead time here. So that means, Kevin, you can't ask quite as many questions as usual. But that's okay. We know you're going to ask a few. So, but Brian, thanks for being here. Look forward to the conversation. And again, thanks for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair Champness. Brian Cately, I'm the Director of the Urban Forestry Division in the Department of Public Works and Environmental Services. I'm here today alone. We've been giving this presentation out to what we call external stakeholders. So folks like the Environmental Quality Advisory Commission, Tree Commission, and obviously your all's group today as a dual presentation between urban forestry and the Department of Planning and Development. But unfortunately, my colleague Joanne Phoebe couldn't make it because she had a Boy Scout or Girl Scout meetings, and I kindly let her go, and I'm going to give this by myself tonight just to give her that break and be with her family. So let me start the presentation, and I'll try to keep it quick. So I apologize. I'm reading some of Joanne's notes, which is, the worst when you watch someone give a presentation and they are basically reading notes. But I apologize for that. But this was a joint effort between urban forestry and the planning department to kind of get to a better place for street trees. And so it was really a joint effort. So this area that I'm covering really isn't my bailiwick. So I'll do my best to answer any questions you have. But if you're wondering why I'm reading slides, it's because some of this stuff is in the urban planning realm that it is just not my lane, as they say. So today we're here sharing some updates to the tree planting standards proposed for some of the denser, more urbanized areas of Fairfax County. The county's current standards were developed when most of Fairfax was suburban and car oriented. As areas develop with more urban forms, emphasis is shifting to pedestrian needs, and these standards don't quite work in these areas. Urban Forestry and the Department of Planning and Development have been working together for a couple years now, trying to make it easier to plant trees and provide canopy credit to developers when they plant street trees. We also want to make sure that our tree planting standards can adapt to different site conditions. So we are ensuring that all sites can plant trees across the county. All right, let me see if I can change the slide. You all see my slide there, right? The opening slide?
Yes.
Right. So where this would apply, the new standards, we're kind of treating this as almost a pilot project to make it easier to plant street trees in these 11 areas of the county. This is less than 4% of the county's total land area, and they're based on current standards used in other jurisdictions. So we really looked out to other jurisdictions like Washington, D.C., Arlington, City of Alexandria, to kind of make sure we were, on par with our neighboring jurisdictions. So the purpose of this effort is simple. it's to encourage more street trees. There are two parts. The first is counting street trees towards tree canopy credits. And you guys might not be familiar with tree canopy credits, but there's an ordinance in the county for just general land development that requires a certain amount of trees. And just to simplify, in a combination of preservation of existing trees and planting of new trees, a certain amount of tree canopy is provided on every development site. And it ranges from 10% on the extreme low for commercial. So when you see like industrial areas or light industrial, we don't have a whole lot of industrial areas, commercial shopping centers, you know, that kind of thing, 10%. And on the high end, we get up to about 30% in the low density residential. So that's, we're trying to increase, we're trying to allow for street trees to count towards those credits. And that's significant. Currently, street trees do not count for canopy credit, except for areas like Tyson's. And you may say, why? It's because in the Tyson's area, there's some sort of, and this is where I get out of my lane. There's some sort of master agreement in the right of way of Ddot that allows, so they basically come to an agreement with Ddot and Tyson's to say, okay, we're allowed to plant trees in the Tyson's area. So basically in the past, what the thinking is that these trees wouldn't be counted in the right of way because of changes with Ddot. You know, they may widen the road or change a particular, you know, space, you know, pedestrian setting or utilities. So as a result, many of these county roads are bare of trees and developers are not rewarded for planting. So this is just a quote about urban street design. Interesting. So this was a picture I took on the campus of UVA when I was there visiting, I think with my family. I didn't realize she used that picture. But basically, and I like this too, an urban street without trees is like a building without a roof. So we have a lot of barren streets in the county. And this is just an example. This is
Is that your
from
daughter, by the way, at UVA? Is that what you're saying? Is that a picture of your daughter or just someone down the street? I'm just wondering.
That is not my daughter. My daughter's 8, or no,
Oh, okay. All right.
But I think
Someday she'll be there.
we were there for, I'm a Hokie myself. So we were there this spring for the Tech UVA baseball game. And so I took that picture because I thought it was really neat on campus. Anyways, I don't know who that woman is.
Okay.
So, so the extreme example, right? This is in downtown Annandale, or not downtown. I call it downtown Annandale. This is near where the Fuddruckers used to be, and I think there's a Popeyes a little bit farther down the street. So here we are, Maple Ave in Annandale. Areas like this were built before there were any landscape requirements. So if you wonder why most of the shopping centers and kind of urbanized areas inside the Beltway are so barren of trees and vegetation, it's because they were developed prior to any landscape requirements. So the landscape requirements were adopted in the 80s, and this is a site where, oh yeah, so unfortunately, if you were aware that a county employee, 2 county employees and a county retiree were actually struck by an out of control vehicle a couple months ago. And unfortunately, the retiree passed from her injuries, and the 2 county employees are kind of, you know, out of, I guess, on disability for the year as they recover. And we aren't claiming that you know, street trees would have prevented the accident, but there is evidence that trees are calming on streetscapes and on roadways. So just the visual barrier of a tree will reduce the speed and help calm the traffic. So I won't read this to you, but here are some really good examples of why trees are important to like the concept of a complete street. And I personally think the biggest thing is introducing nature to these residents that are living in these more urbanized areas. You've heard the term concrete jungle probably your whole life, and there's a little bit of truth to that. And so adding that greenery and that concept of urban greenery is just very important to livability and health of our residents. You may have heard of the concept of a heat island, and that basically that concept is that the solar radiation from the sun is often absorbed by, or is absorbed, not often, it's absorbed by hardscape structures like concrete and asphalt. And what happens is that radiation is absorbed during the day and then released at night. And the result is that those areas are on, give or take, if compared to like a more urbanized area, like say the Clifton area or Great Falls, upwards of 4 to 6 degrees Celsius hotter. And so we want to try to reduce that as much as possible, especially as the county becomes more urbanized. So here's just a map. We got this data from NASA last year. We had like a really cool project where we had some postdocs that were working for NASA that were doing some studies on heat island effects using their latest and greatest, satellite imagery. And if you can kind of see here, I wish I could zoom in because the labels are not that great on this one. But a lot of the areas that we're concentrating, like Reston, I don't know if you can see my cursor here, Reston, Tysons, Springfield, these CRDs and TSA areas in the county kind of overlap. Not only do they overlap with the urban heat island effect, they often overlap with the most vulnerable communities in our county. And if you think about it, I'm a lifelong county resident, and you've probably seen the whole development pattern. But over the years, some of the older neighborhoods, as they turn over, they kind of become, neighborhoods of particular ethnic or, communities that, are just coming into this country or have been here. They work together, and obviously they find affordable housing, and that just happens to coincide with these areas of heat island effects across the county. So this is an area along the Route 1 corridor that's a very good example of where we have low tree canopy and high vulnerability of those populations. So what are we trying to do? And I'm just curious if I could get like a quick raise of hands visually or using the virtual. How many of you all are aware of the county's tree conservation ordinance? Okay, Pete knows about it. Okay, so basically, as I explained earlier, through the land development process, so once I want to say 2,500 square feet of soils disturbed, basically the same threshold that triggers a lot of the sediment erosion control that prevents like dirt and silt going into the bay. Once that's triggered, the tree conservation ordinance is triggered. And through that, depending on the zoning class of a particular parcel, so residential, commercial, agriculture, multifamily, and there's, a whole cadre of different densities. Based on that, the Board of Supervisors has approved a 10-year tree canopy requirement. That requirement can be met through preservation, which is preferred, or planting, which is where this applies. So like I said, on the industrial side, on the low end, it's 10%. On the lower event, like a 5-acre lot in Great Falls or Clifton, it's upwards of 30%.
Brian, the ROW, remind me, sorry, what ROW stands for?
Right of way.
Right of way, of course. Thank you.
And in Fairfax County, for the most part, the right of way is controlled by Virginia Department of Transportation. For the most part, there's a couple exceptions. So what we're going to do here is we're going to incentivize. So the PFM is the Public Facilities Manual, and that's kind of the, for lack of a better term, the Bible, the guidelines of doing land development. Not only it's a little confusing because it's called the Public Facilities Manual, It applies to public facilities and private facilities. It's basically the standards and guidelines that we hold developers to through the development process. And so there's 3 levels that we're proposing here. The 10-year are the first place is you meet all of those standards in these urbanized areas. And we want to incentivize that because we would like to see trees succeed. And if you meet all of that, we're going to give you 1.5 times canopy credit. We're going to give you a bonus. We're going to give you a little bit more credit if you meet all those standards. But we know that meeting those standards, especially in these urbanized areas, especially the ones that are redeveloping, it's tough. So our second place standard will be if you meet the soil volume requirements of the PFM, but not all the other provisions are met. So you meet enough growing space for those roots of the tree to make it, we'll give you full credit. And then the alternative tree planting standard that we're proposing here, and I think that's really the crux of the presentation tonight, is we're going to give you we're going to give you less credit. It's going to be disincentivized, but we're going to give you some credit. And you may say to yourself, whoa, why? Well, why are you giving any? Right now, we don't give any credit, and yet those trees are still planted in the landscape. So we don't give any credit to these trees. And by not giving them any credit, my division has very little oversight of the installation of these trees. So by giving a discounted credit, we're hoping to see better successes with street trees and like better spaces. So that's kind of the overview of the tiered kind of incentive, disincentive program that we're going to be giving for tree canopy credits in the right of way. All right, I'll try to go through this a little quicker because I know I'm being long-winded. So the soil volume requirements, you guys may not be too concerned about this, but basically under the current PFM standard, for you to get full credit, you need to have 700 cubic feet. And then we allow for what's called contiguous soil panels, and they kind of build upon each other, saying, you know, if you have 2 trees, you don't need 700 cubic feet. We'll reduce that to 600. And then as the trees build out, we reduce that to 500, because research and academic, studies have shown that the trees kind of will share resources just like they will in like your backyard, or if you've seen, trees in DC when you see them planting in that landscape strip. So, and here's the big restriction with the current PFM standards. We require an 8-foot width minimum. And that becomes problematic when you get into these very dense areas. 8 foot wide starts to kind of get, eat into the space allowed for utilities, for say bike lanes, multimodal transportation, a dedicated bus lane. Real estate becomes very cramped when you start getting into it, and 8 feet is a lot. And we recognize it in urban forestry, and planning has really brought it to our attention that this is problematic. So this standard kind of already exists to a certain extent in the Tysons area. So in the Tysons area, under the urban design guidelines, 400 cubic feet of soil is the minimum, with a 6-foot wide surface area, with an extended two feet of subsurface. So it's a good compromise, but we're looking to go a little beyond that. And so the tree trunk in Tysons has to be 4 foot from the edge of curve. And you may say to yourself, well, why does it matter that the tree is a distance from the curve? As trees get very large, and you see them in different urbanized areas around the country, we really need to have the structural stability of the roots to keep that tree upright and not become a risk to the public. So that's where that standard comes from. It's more of a suburban standard, but it's the best. It's ideal. It's what we want, but we realize that there has to be compromise. So here's a couple things with the alternative tree planting standard. So the minimum tree planting space will be 5 foot wide. So remember, in the current PFM standard, it's 8 foot wide. We're reducing that to 5 foot wide. It'll be 17.5 feet long and 3.5 feet deep, which will allow for 300 cubic feet of soil for the tree. Not ideal, but this is really the minimum. This is not what we're going for, but this is what we think is the minimum a tree needs to survive. And we're also going to require the trees be a certain caliper. So caliper is the size of the diameter of the tree trunk. And so these trees will have to be 2.5 to 4 inches in size, which is not perfect, but it allows for trees to be established and kind of present. What I like to say is they're teenager proof when we put them in the streets, because if you put them any smaller, we tend to see a lot of them come down for whatever reason. The other big thing with this new standard is before we will accept tree canopy credit, there will have to be a perpetual maintenance agreement with Ddot. So, which will mean that it will be recorded at the courthouse. That tree will be there in perpetuity until that agreement is either dissolved or, overcome by events. Like for example, Ddot decides they want to widen the road. There's only so much we can do. Ddot kind of trumps us on like landscape panels, but it should allow, and our goal is a 10-year tree canopy. That's really the purpose of the ordinance. Anything more than that is great, but really it's just trying to get to 10 years. So we think this works.
Brian, real fast, if we could, the urban street standards, I presume they're less tight than the ones you've got here, that these are the tightest that the county would allow, is what you've just described here, the 5 feet wide, 300 cubic feet, or are there areas where they're even tighter, more tightly placed?
So this will be the smallest allowed for tree canopy credit.
Okay.
So currently, through the proper process of land development, trees are allowed to be proffered to whatever the Board of Supervisors agrees to. So there are trees in much smaller spaces all across the county in urbanized areas, but they don't receive canopy credit, and my division does not do any rigorous inspection of those trees. They're basically considered aesthetic amenities. They're not really regulated. So you'll see it in like Reston and Tyson. They're smaller tree planting spaces, and they have variable success rates. But my division and no real other division within the county has a whole lot of oversight of them. So by allowing this alternative minimum standard, not only does it kind of set a bare minimum for tree planting spaces, it allows the county to have a little bit better oversight. Because right now we see them all the time. They get approved through the proper process with the planning commission, but yet we don't really have a lot of oversight or say in the success of that tree. So this should help with that. If that
Brian, do you have any idea, this kind of planting in a somewhat restricted area, does it affect the life expectancy of the trees? Because our arborist has told us, we've got trees in here, and he said these oaks will probably live to be a little over 100 years old here. And I said, well, that's, okay. And he said, well, if they're out in the wild, in a real forest, they could live a lot longer than that. So I'm wondering if putting them in this kind of an urban environment, your knowledge of forestry tells you could expect to affect the life expectancy of these trees. So maybe replacing them every 80 years.
Oh, 80 years would be lucky. So you'll see, the county kind of standard is a 10-year canopy. And so we kind of just recognize that in some of these tight spaces, so this minimum space, this is not going to be the goal. All right, this is going to be like when there's a restricted space, there's a retrofit. We'll go through some examples here, but there's a retrofitted space and there's a weird parking, cutout that's required. if they can meet this, they can still get a reduced credit. It's not ideal, and we don't expect the trees to make it to like 60, 70, 80 years. We're really just going for 10 years, but you know, the forester in me says if we can get them to 30 to 50 years, that would be awesome. But we recognize that these will kind of be like an agricultural crop where they'll need to be replaced on a regular basis. Urban streetscapes are not ideal. Like you all probably have hiked around in your lives, you know, checked out different national parks. How often do you see a tree growing out of like a crack in a piece of granite? Not very often. So for us to expect a large tree to grow out of a concrete, you know, box, and what we call them in the forestry world, our nickname for these smaller spaces, and I'm talking much smaller than this 5 by 17, and we'll go into that a little bit in a couple of minutes. We call them tree coffins. That's what we call them, because you plant them and you just kind of expect the tree to die. We've expanded the minimal dimensions beyond our neighboring jurisdictions like Arlington and Alexandria. So we're hoping to see a little bit of better success, but we've seen anecdotal success in those other jurisdictions. So Roger, I really appreciate your question because you've nailed it. We really don't have long expectation for these trees, but they also are not the norm. This will be for the exception where there's a space that just, you know, they've run out of real estate. They need to get the tree in there. The tree will have some other benefits to the community like shade, aesthetics, you know, air cleaning, a little bit of stormwater, but we're not really setting this tree up for a whole lot of success. And that's just kind of accepted. And that's part of the reason why we have the incentive disincentive, right? So I'm an economic nerd. And so my brother and my father are both economists. And so when you have a problem like this where you can't really solve the issue through just straightforward specifications, and you know that there's a lot of variables, you incentivize the better, you know, specification or the better condition, and you disincentivize the worst. And then hopefully what my thought process is that it will balance between the two, because they still need to meet that tree canopy on site. So with these tight spaces, they're gonna need the larger tree planting space to make their requirement.
Are you going to have problems with Ddot on this? In my old neighborhood, when we moved in there in 1980, we had lawn extensions, whatever you call them down here. Northeastern Ohio, we call it a devil strip, but nobody knows what it is. We had cherry blossom trees, and in April and May, it was just as pink as it could be. And we hadn't lived there very long, and those trees were beginning to die. And we were told these are ornamental cherry trees, and their life expectancy is about 30 years. Okay, so we're taking them out. Now we want to put trees in, and Ddot, since they had the right of way there, no. We had to really go to the mat with them on that, and they did finally allow us to plant some June blooming, white blooming trees. So if you go to that neighborhood now, you'll see there very few of those old cherries are there. You know, I love what you're doing, but I think you're going to have a real problem 30 or 40 years down the road. I don't want this anymore. You know, that costs too much money. I'm an economic nerd too. Nothing you can do about it, but I mean, you're doing the best you can, but I kind of worry about that.
I agree with you, Roger. I think what it comes down to is whether there's trees there or not. And so some of those, and I've heard that term too, hell strip. We have them in my neighborhood. I'm here in Fairfax Station. It's only about 2.5 feet wide, and that obviously is not enough space to plant a tree. And though people have planted them, even in my neighborhood, and you can see sidewalks buckling and stuff like that. This perpetual maintenance agreement. So basically VDOT is going to have to sign off on this, and the county has had success in getting these maintenance agreements with VDOT. The big thing I think will be is the speed limit will limit the areas that will qualify for this. So basically, if you're above 25 miles an hour, the clear zone in the line of sight is probably going to eliminate the possibility of having these trees. So if you're on like a 45-mile-per-hour road, you're likely not to see street trees. But if you're in one of these more dense urban areas, there's a good chance. Well, let me show you some examples because I think they're.
Brian, I think you muted yourself.
Okay,
Yep, there you go.
thank you. So here's some cross sections of the full credit. So this is our example of a full credit. It'll be 17.5 feet in length, 5 feet wide, with a contiguous soil panel on it. Can you see my cursor moving here? I don't know if you can.
Yeah,
But okay, that area there, that connects the two soil panels. This is kind of our ideal situation in these urban areas, and this will get full canopy credit underneath these standards. And let me see the next one. Oh, there we go. This is the minimum standard, the third place, as we call them. And the third place is that 3.5. This is the tree box, and this is significantly bigger than the minimum tree planting standards in Arlington and Alexandria. And I'll show you an example here coming up photographically. And here's what we call a retrofit. So the example we're using here, and what kind of drove this to begin with, was some of the interest from the redevelopment of the McLean area and some of the business concerns about trying to fit trees and tree canopy. They're essentially in McLean, they're going to redevelop that downtown area, but for the majority of it, it's essentially infill development, meaning those lots are kind of established and there will not be a lot of rezoning done in that area. So how do you fit trees into that? And this is kind of the example of the retrofit of that area. Okay, so we got a bunch of staff feedback. We before we came out to the external stakeholders, we went to staff. So here's a couple things. One is that the soil depth should not be deeper than 3.5 feet. So we made some adjustments. Category 4 trees should only receive a half a canopy credit. Category 4 trees are like the willow oaks, the hybrid elms, the London plane trees, those large street trees you see all over the DC area. And then just the fact that alternative dimensions should be considered provided that they allow for enough soil volume. So that's the whole parking area cutout issue that we're seeing around the county. And then just challenges. And I won't read this to you directly, but the one that's probably huge is ADA issues. So we know that trees lift sidewalks, and so we need to be mindful of that in our planning. My grandmother tripped and broke her hip at a Boscov's in Scranton, Pennsylvania 30 years ago, and that led to her decline, essentially, and it was because a tree was lifted a sidewalk panel. So I'm highly aware of that. The biggest factor in making these trees successful will be the quality of the soil. Dirt is not dirt to a plant. We need to have a lot of organic material. There needs to be good, what's called cation exchange capacity. So nutrients being able to exchange electrons in an oxygenized environment. So that's probably the biggest thing there. So here's some next steps. We're hoping to get to the Board of Supervisors in December for a hearing date. If you have any questions about this, my understanding of the urban design guidelines is it does not follow the same path as county code. So this will not be approved as a code amendment. This will be approved as a change to the urban design guidelines, which if you have any questions, send them to me and we'll have DPD answer them because I don't 100% understand how that works. But it's a mechanism allowed for in the public facility manual to allow some flexibility in urban design in those areas that we showed at the beginning of the presentation. So a couple examples. This is an example of the minimum standard. So 17.5 by 5 feet. So assuming there's good quality soil, this would get 0.75 credits. Or if we follow that staff recommendation, if it's a category 4 tree, which is a larger tree, might only get a half credit. So we want to disincentivize this, but allow it.
How big do those trees get? I mean, when they're fully grown?
They will get to be, and we'll show one here later on, but upwards of 30 inches in diameter.
No, I'm talking about the height of the canopy.
Oh, 60 to 70 feet.
Oh, okay.
So significant. So I think that tree is,
I think in the next picture,
looks like a maple. So this is down in Arlington. This is like a newer area of Arlington, the Penrose area. So this
there you go.
This is what we're not going for.
Oh.
This is the 3 by 3 foot space that we're concerned about, and I'll show you a photo in a little while of why we're concerned about it. But
Well, that
each-
tree looks like it's about 30 feet, 50 feet maybe.
yeah, that's at least a story and a half. I know this tree because I used to work for Arlington County. I used to be the urban forestry manager. I replaced this tree 3 times in 10 years. So this is what we're not going for. We want to expand the size of this planting space so that the tree can be successful. But even though this planting space is small, take a look at the detail of that photo. Where is that family standing while they wait for the Metro bus?
Underneath the tree.
Tree. They're in the shade. And that's the important part of the urban heat island mitigation that we're going for. This is the Arlington County minimum standard, 4 by 8 feet. And so I know for a fact that this is the political decision that was made about 25 years ago. And the urban planners and the foresters in Arlington County, and when I was there, we were fighting against it to expand the soil volume requirement because we saw high mortality in trees in these spaces. So this is 4 by 8 feet. Our minimum standard will be 5 by 17.5. So I don't know order of magnitude, but significantly bigger than what the minimum standard is in Arlington. So this is the current PFM standard. And you may ask yourself, well, how is that the current standard? I don't see how these little spaces could make up enough to meet the 8-foot restricted barrier in the soil volumes. Well, underneath these sidewalk panels are what are called suspended soils. So it's a suspended cells that basically, you may have heard the term cantilevered sidewalk. That's one other method. Basically, that sidewalk is suspended and there is soil available to the tree that allows for water to go in and for the tree to grow. So
Are those sidewalks permeable? In other words, the water gets through them or around them?
no, not in this case. There are permeable sidewalks, and you see those a lot in the city of Alexandria. But these are just suspended concrete panels. So underneath these panels is soil available for both water to go into and the tree to go. So this is actually the standard we're looking for. If we could get this would get 1.5 times credit for tree canopy, and it's a win-win. And that's why we want to incentivize it. The problem is each one of these tree planters is probably about $8,000 to $10,000, and that's using dollars from like 3-4 years ago. So it's probably upwards with inflation and construction costs, upwards of $12,000 to $15,000 a planter. So we see a lot of pushback from the developers to do this. That's why we want to give them an incentive to do it. So a couple more slides here. So on the left here, this is in the Eisenhower area of Alexandria. Those would not get credit. Those are like 4 by 6, but you can see those bricks there, Roger. Those are permeable. And that kind of helps with the tree's success, but it's still not ideal. That's not what we want to spec. And on the right, that's a 5 by, I don't know how deep contiguous panel. That's kind of what we're going for. We like that. And it works in areas like townhouse communities and whatnot. Here's what we're trying to avoid. So remember that space, the 3 by 3 space in front of the cava where the family was sitting underneath it. Well, this is what happens. Nature is resilient. And so as much as I could tell you the trees will not survive in a 3x3 space, well, guess what? They will. But they cause a heck of a lot of problems when they do. You can see in this corner, there's a manhole and
Yeah.
the curbs.
Sidewalk.
Yeah, the curb's been cut in once, and basically what I see as an arborist when I see this is potential for failure on either property or people. So this is not ideal. We need to have enough rooting space. So that's why that 5x17 space.
I see that depression in the brick sidewalk there. I mean, that's the kind of thing that injured your mother or your grandmother. I mean, or it could injure anybody
Could injure anyone.
trying to walk through that place. Right.
God knows. I mean, the utility conflicts in Arlington County, luckily, we don't have as much of that in Fairfax. But basically, the utilities are run up the middle of the roads in Arlington County with laterals going out. At least for the most part in Fairfax County, we've deconflicted our roads and our utilities. So that avoids a lot of those issues. But that depression there is most likely due to something going on with either water seepage in that utility, whatever is going on there. And then I think this is the last space. So if you live in the Fairfax City area, if you remember where Eastern Mountain Sports was, kind of in the Fairfax Circle area, there's a new giant there. And this is along Blake Lane. This is a 6-foot wide continuous panel. This is good to go. This would get full credit, may even get time and a half credit, or 1.5 credits of tree canopy. This is kind of what we're going for. And with that, I think I'm done. So hopefully I didn't ramble too long. I know you guys probably have long meetings, so I apologize. I'm known to ramble. Questions, concerns?
I have one question for you.
Yes, sir.
It may not apply every place, but at one point, the soil depth was kept at, I think, 3 feet 6 inches, because below that, the oxygen is not there for the roots.
Yes.
Is that in all cases, meaning in nature too, or is that just probably in these boxes?
Typically in nature, at least in this area of the world, and that's what I'm familiar with. Like I said, I'm a Hokie. Trees typically they're what are called fine roots, which help them get nutrients, are within the first 6 to 8 inches of the soil, and then their structural roots can go down as deep as 3 feet. So structural roots are kind of like the anchor of the root, and the fine roots is where the tree gets its nutrients and oxygen in the soil. So yes, basically that mimics the limitations of nature. In nature, it's actually going to be shallower for the most part. But research has shown in these very confined spaces, like I said, nature is resilient and will adapt. They'll go down to about 3.5 feet, but beyond 3.5 feet, there's not much oxygen, and the roots just don't do anything.
And it's mostly for the very fine roots. Is that what you're talking about? I know I planted pecan trees, and they have a main root that seems to go down as many feet.
Oh, the old
So,
taproot. Yes,
But-
the taproot. There's not many trees that have the taproot. Pecan trees have them. Hickory trees have them. And if you ever have a crepe myrtle, if you ever try to dig out a crepe myrtle, one of those, and those are native to India, they all have really strong taproots. Typically, a tree will have a taproot as it establishes, like as a small sapling, and then that taproot will go away. But pecans, hickories, and crepe myrtles, I know offhand, have really, they'll go down a foot or two, and they're a heck. If you've ever tried to dig one out, it's not fun.
okay. Well, thank you. I learned something.
Kevin.
First of all, I want to apologize for our chairman and board secretary for not heeding Calvin's admonition to hold questions until the end. They'll be brought up before the TAC tribunal at a later date. But I did have a couple of questions. The first one, it might be a little bit adjacent to your area or totally not even close to it, but when developers come in, build housing or shopping center, you'll see all these beautiful old growth trees and bam, they're gone. And then they put these saplings in to meet whatever requirement that is. And I wondered if, you could comment on that. And then what happens after 10 years? You said it's good for 10 years. What do you do then? And I think maybe the third one was, if somebody thumbs your nose at this requirement, what do? Do you put on your Colt 45 and frog march them out to the pavement there to, force them to do something?
All right, let me see if I can get these in order. The whole issue of clearing trees through development. So as hard as this is to believe, Fairfax County has the strictest tree conservation ordinance in the entire state. We're the only jurisdiction I'm aware of that has adopted a conservation ordinance, meaning we require a certain percentage of trees to be preserved during the land development process. And we also have a canopy requirement. So say the canopy requirement, it's really convoluted, but I'll give a general example. You have a 1 acre plot that's low density residential. And it's 1 acre, it's 100% trees. The requirement is for 30% of those trees to be preserved. So if you have a 1 acre lot, all you have to do is say 0.3 acres of those trees and you meet the requirement. But if you can't meet those requirements through preservation, you say you can only meet 0.1 acres. Those 0.2 acres can be met through preservation, which I know doesn't sound great, and it lends itself to a lot of tree removal. The fact of the matter is, at least from my understanding, is that the land rights and the zoned use trump our tree conservation ordinance severely, to the point where if you have the right to build it and you can justify your right to build it, you're allowed to build it. In other parts of the state that have adopted, and this is an enabling legislation, so it doesn't even mean you have to adopt it, but other counties have adopted, let's say Prince William County is a good example. That 1 acre lot, you might need to meet that 0.3 acres of tree canopy, but you can clear your entire lot and meet it all full permits. Fairfax County is the only jurisdiction that requires preservation. So that's a good thing. Could it be better? Yes. The problem is, across the state, being a very large state, is that we're the only ones. And when you get down to Richmond during the General Assembly, ideas from, I'll be frank, ideas from Fairfax are not really on other jurisdictions' minds. So we're doing a lot to try to improve that, but it's hard to get that consensus from the other jurisdictions. In regards to the 10-year tree canopy, that's a goal that we're kind of setting through the development process. At the end of 10 years, so by the way, you go through the land development process, and let's go outside. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a perpetual maintenance agreement on these trees that we're proposing as street trees. Those trees will have to be there, and that can be enforced by our zoning ordinance in perpetuity. So VDOT agrees to it, Fairfax County agrees to it, it's in the court, and it's in the courthouse. Those trees have to be replaced and maintained. But if you go outside of one of these jurisdictions that I'm displaying here, so if you go outside of Merrifield and you go to just a residential area, once you go through the land development process, say you tear down a Cape Cod, you build a McMansion, you meet your tree canopy requirements. As soon as you're off bond, you don't have to keep those trees there. There's nothing requiring those trees to be there afterwards. And that's problematic. We don't see it a whole lot, but we have seen it where people just don't want the trees and they just rip them out. It happens on occasion. For the most part, people are not going to tear out, a $400 investment unless it conflicts with, a land use that they have, like a volleyball court or a patio or something like that. So for the most part, we see those trees in there. And then I wrote down the first two, but I didn't write down the last one.
The enforcement where you slap on your Colt 45 and
That's the hardest one. So basically, all the enforcement of the tree conservation ordinance is done through the land development services site inspectors. So we're kind of like consultants. But the sediment erosion control law gives the county a heck of a lot of jurisdiction to basically hold these developers' feet to the fire as they go through the process. So if we come out and we see that a tree should have been preserved and wasn't, in some cases we'll fine them. In other cases, we'll just say it just matters on the situation, because there could be real construction reasons why that tree was removed, but those removals are always mitigated through the process. So it'll either be fined and mitigated, or just, all right, we knew you took out this tree. If you plant 5 trees over here, we'll call it even, and there's that kind of negotiation done. But if it's like a preserved tree that's supposed to be there, especially if it's proffered through the zoning process, we will turn the screws on that development.
Do you actually check for the depth of the dirt, and if they've got a foot extra of dirt, do you penalize them for that?
Well, we wouldn't penalize it, but we wouldn't count it, right? So if they were to come to us and say, okay, instead of 5 by 3.5 by 17.5, you came to us with 5 by 4 by 5, the same dimensions, adds up, do the math, it adds up to 300 cubic feet. We wouldn't give them credit, but if they were to come to us with a 17.5 by 5 by 4 foot, we wouldn't penalize them for having the extra depth, but we wouldn't give them any credit for that soil, if that makes sense.
No, I mean, well, height, width and length are meet your specs, but it was what Pete was talking about earlier, where it's just odd to limit the depth of dirt. I didn't know that was a negative. If you go down an extra foot of dirt, that's.
And you know what that extra depth is good for in these urban spaces is for under drains and stormwater management, and possibly connecting these tree pits. And in many situations, if they're big enough, there is a stormwater BMP credit that can be applied to tree planting spaces. We wouldn't likely allow that for the smaller spaces, but for the bigger spaces, where we would allow for it, that's where the extra depth may become useful for connecting, connecting into the storm drain, or allowing for like 4 bays and that kind of engineered stormwater BMP.
But Brian, maybe I'm misunderstanding it, because I thought it was a maximum depth, not a minimum depth, that it's in your spec. And if you exceed the maximum depth, are you in trouble?
No, but you will not get credit for that extra depth.
Okay.
So you could have a 5 foot deep pit with an under drain system or whatever. We'll just only give you credit for the soil up to 3.5 feet.
Right. Okay. But you don't get penalized just because you want a foot
You
deep.
can get penalized. No.
All right. Thank you.
I do see it's 8:31. Brian, I know you've got to go. I did have one question, but I could, put it on the table. Maybe you can respond later. I don't know if you have a couple minutes, but
Yeah,
do you need to head out, or?
No worries. I'm just gonna put the kids to bed, sooner than later.
They're going to be up late watching watching cartoons. So yeah.
Yeah, no. If you all remember the show Full House, they're really into that '90s show Full House right now. So I think they're watching that.
Yes. Oh no, appreciate it.
Just show them the beginning of our meetings, and that'll put them down right away.
Clearly. Well, before I ask my questions, are there any other commissioners who would like to ask a quick question here? Then I'll let Brian go, and so we can watch Full House with his kids. Okay, I appreciate it. Brian, the question I had there are 2 pieces, but related. Recognize the the standards there. Definitely appreciate the making them a little bit smaller so that perhaps get more trees in, have more areas where the trees can be put in. But still what I'm wondering about, and I know this has got to be partly what you're thinking, but, you know, two areas. One is where things already are a little tight. We saw the one picture of the tree with the, you know, the buckled bricks there. Not too many urban areas. It's not like Washington, D.C. around here, but there are some areas where, you know, it's a little tight and you probably just don't have that, you know, that amount. So, you know, the you know, 5 foot, the 17 foot seems, you know, understandable, very achievable in, you know, sort of a more suburban-ish kind of area. As we move more towards the urban side, I think it's a little harder to do. But also, and back to your picture of the, you know, the street with no tree cover whatsoever, you know, how can these standards, or right here, this one right here, how could we get trees there? You know, would we have those same tree standards? Is there a way we could have a smaller tree box or something? I recognize it's probably not going to be developed, and that's where a lot of this comes from. But to me, it sort of seems that while there's a good solid center piece here, on the edges of areas where you'd like to be able to get more trees, I'm not sure it's going to be that effective. I'm just kind of wondering what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, that, and this comes back to landowner rights in these areas, you know, if that, you know, wherever this, what is this, like a Beamer or an Audi, if this particular strip building with parking doesn't want to redevelop, you can see there's a driveway apron there. You know, if they don't want to redevelop, you know, it's just gonna stay that way. But if this site owner says, okay, I want to, you know, redevelop as a, you know, I don't know, a small dental office building or a, you know, multi-use resident, you know, some sort of site, that's where the opportunity comes in. Now, do I see an opportunity for the county itself retrofitting areas in CRDs, especially, you know, using county monies as, you know, say sidewalk improvements or something like that? Yes. The issue is going to be is getting kind of buy-in from the landowner, right? Because, you know, I doubt, and you know, don't hold me to this, but I doubt we're going to use any kind of takings, you know, mechanism to kind of, you know, in these types of areas to kind of take land to have tree planting. But say if either one of these sides of the street, there was a county initiative to kind of revamp the sidewalk, similar to if you've been in downtown Springfield, they did a lot of work revamping the sidewalk system in there. That would allow for some opportunities there and, you know, possibly internet. But I think this is geared towards redevelopment. I mean, the county projects for redeveloping pedestrian sidewalks in this, at least right now, are probably limited by funding. So we could see a few of them, but I don't see that being like a huge initiative throughout the county.
Okay.
Well, I'm looking at that picture on the right, that brick building. If you're going to, that's the one. If you're going to redevelop that, I think the common wisdom now would be to move that building toward the street and take the parking behind it. This is what they've done in Falls Church City. Seems to be the common wisdom right now. And of course, the owner of that would surrender maybe 20 or 30 feet, that frontage, and have parking behind the building. Of course, ultimately they lose parking spaces. I'm going to leave it right there because we had a meeting on this on parking about a month or so ago. That seems to me would be the only way that you could redevelop that as a pedestrian friendly bicycle friendly urbanscape. Because in Falls Church City, they have George Mason Centers built right up on the street. And the parking is behind it in a deck. It seems to be what Falls Church is doing. Of course, they roll their own. We can't tell them what to do. But
And that's totally outside my bailiwick, but I've seen, I will say I confirm those observations, Roger. You know, so that's probably a good, you know, example of what could be done. You know, it's really a shame when you look at these old areas. It's like, you know, that the intention of downtown Annandale was not intended to be this. It was probably, really looking to create that kind of urban feel, and they missed it 40 years ago. So is there an opportunity now as these sites start to redevelop and we hold them to these new standards? I think that's where the potential is. And I think by introducing this stuff into the urban design guidelines, we're setting up the community to have success and not basically redevelop with this type of condition.
I just wonder how much of a chime in you have to that process if somebody were able or willing to do something about it. I'm thinking of Seven Corners Shopping Center, which is an asphalt desert. That's an asphalt desert right there. And not only do you see a lot of parking spaces, they're all empty. Maybe it's a Sunday afternoon, I don't know. But
I think
it's got to be some cross fertilization among the disciplines here, whether it's the forester and the Department of Public Works or zoning commission or whatever, to make that inhabitable.
Well, I think that's the big thing. So the difference between infill and rezoning projects, meaning if that building of this brick building, if they decided, if I don't know this is zoned, but say it's zoned commercial, right? That under Virginia law, if they redevelop it as commercial, they can kind of do what they want to do.
Yep.
But if they rezone it, then the county has a process to negotiate. And so I think, and I think this is best laid out to the planning and development folks, but I think the plan is in a lot of these areas is for the county to kind of, lean in on the street side, even in these infill development sites. So say this develops as infill, the county would be, say, recognizing areas similar to the Route 1 corridor in Embark, where they're saying, okay, we'll take over the street from VDOT and improve it. Now, where they're planning to do that, I'm not gonna, that's out of my bailiwick. But I would assume that as we move forward in these CRDs, that the county is going to recognize areas that need, a little bit of boost as far as the redevelopment side. Like they can't do much on the infill side, but the right of way that VDOT controls, the county can lean in on that and influence how the streetscape develops.
And how much input does your function have with that? Can you make a case for doing something for it or with it? Because you're going to be dealing with some other folks too. Get them to see the wisdom of what they're trying to do.
Well, I
Because
think
you're talking about heat islands, I can't think of a bigger heat island than an asphalt parking lot.
exactly. So I think we're leaning towards, as much as we can. So yeah, we're limited right now, with the infill spaces. It's really almost voluntary for the developer to kind of get in line. I mean, we can bring them into compliance with some of the stormwater regs and whatnot. And so maybe through that process, they're more, inclined to do it. But basically like I like to tell folks, I'm the Lorax, so I speak for the trees in Fairfax County. So when we see these sites come through, we do the best we can to get as much tree canopy as possible. And you'd be surprised, most developers recognize that treed sites overall do better economically.
Yep.
And so they're not opposed to it. What it comes down to is, they're getting all this capital and they've got all these loans, going in play to get the project done. And so that's what they're concerned about, is basically consistency with expectations from the county. But I've never really run into a developer that's like, I'm not into trees, because I think they recognize the value trees have on their sites in the long run.
Yep.
Well,
Good luck. I wish
well,
you
thanks.
well.
Appreciate it. Just make one observation, and then Brian, very much appreciate you stick around for a few extra minutes and let you go. But it's understandable that the opportunities present themselves when redevelopment happens. well, that's associated with positive economic opportunity. So the lower socioeconomic areas, sometimes, often, less economic opportunity, more stagnation, things stay the way they are. And so that's just a reality there that becomes part of the challenge, where there's really not enough financial movement, so to speak, to have some of these redevelopments. So it kind of, it is what it is, but and not sure if there's any other things we can do, but did just want to make the the observation. Unless there's any other urgent matters from the commissioners, Brian, very much appreciate you joining us. Sorry that Joanne wasn't able to be here. I hope the Cub Scouts went well. Enjoy the rest of the evening with your kids, putting them to bed, watching the show with them, whatever good dad does. Thanks for coming, and look forward to keeping in touch and hearing how things proceed. So thanks very much.
I appreciate it anytime, and I will drop my email address in the chat if you guys have any additional questions or concerns. I'd like to thank you all for taking the time, and I know I'm a rambler, so I appreciate your patience.
Thanks,
You did good, Brian.
Don't let your kids get too attached to the Full House actor there. It doesn't end well in later life.
Well, that's right.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Please don't use the chat function. Just if they have question, I can send their question to you. Yeah.
Okay.
But thank you. Yeah, thank you. Thanks a lot.
Appreciate it very much. Okay. Next, would like to move on to discussing the agenda for the joint meeting with the Board of Supervisors. As commissioners may recall, our last meeting, we were talking about the joint meeting that we're scheduled to have with the Board of Supervisors. It was scheduled for September 30th. Noted I say was. It has been delayed, and there's a story behind that. I'd like to share that with commissioners, and then talk a bit about how we'd like to proceed. Basically, Commissioner Sitnick and I had a conversation with Supervisor Alcorn back in August to talk about the options for the joint meeting there. Basically, what we were looking to do, and this is coming out of our meeting last month, was rather than have the TAC make a presentation to the board, what we wanted to do was have a topic that we could jointly discuss. There was also, we discussed, and Mr. Alcorn brought up, and I'm sure we will have when we do this, an opportunity for items of interest, priorities, transportation priorities, and things like that. In other words, an opportunity for supervisors and commissioners to make particular points they want to make. But we looked at a couple focus areas for this joint meeting, and basically, not surprisingly, keying into our work plan. This is an area that we've obviously spent some time focusing on areas, so it's a good checklist, just to sort of remind us, hey, what about this, what about that? So we looked at some transit-oriented development activities, which is actually where we sort of came back to, and I'll talk about that in a moment. Perhaps trails, sidewalks, and bikeways. Obviously, the active Fairfax plan, that we've had a number of conversations about that. Vehicle congestion mitigation, sort of the post-pandemic commuting patterns and things like that. And also we threw on for discussion perhaps another update on the West Falls Church update. We've had conversations there. We just had a meeting about that a couple weeks ago, but it really sort of touches a number of areas of common interest there. And also, and Kevin, I know we talked a bit about this at the end of last month's meeting, but also the idea of a particular topic, the bus services for underserved areas. As we talked about it with Mr. Alcorn, and also I'll acknowledge we talked about it with Rachel Flynn, as you know, our the deputy county executive there. And one of the things that she's talked often about, and we have talked about, is making place and what it takes to make place. And so among those three primary topic areas that I described based on the work plan, we really started to gravitate to sort of the the making place, the redesigning and things like that. And one of the critical aspects of that is alternate measures of effectiveness. There is a standard now, LOS, which of course I'm blanking now on exactly what it stands for, but basically, do you remember, Pete? I'm trying to think, but
It just service.
level of service.
Yeah, level of service.
Level of service. Designed for large streets, large, auto throughput. As we talk about, while there will always be places where that's needed, what we're doing now is looking for places where there's less of it. A street road diets, slowing some, car movement. But honestly, the streets we've just talked, the trees we just talked about here, as part of sort of more urban design activities there. And so one of the key measures there is looking at things a little bit differently. That is something that is not surprisingly on the radar screen, as it were, of the supervisors already. And in fact, it was a tentative topic for their BTC, Board Transportation Committee meeting on the 30th as well. So as we talk about it with Mr. Alcorn, he agreed, we agreed with him, we all agreed that AMOE seemed a good topic for us to dive into, because a chance for us to learn a little bit together. Also a chance for us to see how commissioners are, supervisors are looking at things, hear that dialogue. But the topic is not going to really be ready for a in-depth conversation till at least December, perhaps into January. And so what Mr. Alcorn preferred to do, and we agreed with this, was rather than just have a meeting on the 30th because that's on the calendar, we thought we'd save our rare opportunity to have a joint meeting with the board for a topic we felt was most appropriate. So the topic is going to be the alternate measures of effectiveness. That's the one we'll do with the Board of Supervisors, again, probably maybe January, something like that. So that's why we no longer have the joint meeting here on September 30th. That said, I would like to, talk a bit about that, talk about some of the focus there a little bit, but also we now have a couple months to, think of some comments. I want to, make sure that we've done to kind of get ourselves mentally ready, so to speak, and prepared for some conversations and all that. But that's where we stand with the meeting, with the joint meeting of the Board of Supervisors. So what I do is take a pause here and just see if there's any comments or observations, something like that. Pete, I'll offer to you first. If there's any observations you'd like to make based upon our meetings and what you're thinking in terms of going forward.
Well, seeing what this work list, it fits right in the middle of what Roger and I are supposed to be working on. I kind of like the idea, but I know the TAC has often discussed alternatives to level of service and making place and everything else, road diets. But my only concern before we went forward was to make sure that the TAC in fact does support something like the alternative measures. Maybe not all the details because we don't know them yet. But if we all agree that a lot of our work items are the things that we should be concentrating on, then to me it's appropriate, and it gives us an opportunity to really touch on everything we've been talking about, including trees, like we did tonight, because that's part of making place. That picture that they showed tonight with the frankly, no trees and really no cars on the road, is a good example of what's wrong. Because that was there's no doubt level of service built those roads and took away probably the trees that were there 50 years ago. So
more than 50 years ago.
Pardon me?
Probably more than 50 years ago.
Yes, yes.
Pete. And I think that where you are down there on Route 1 is ready for some real changes when they finally put that BRT system in. You're going to have an opportunity there to really refashion that whole Route 1 corridor. And in terms of making place. And I think we know enough now that we can probably do a better job than they did in 1948.
Certainly hope so.
We built this monster over the last 70 years, and now we've decided we don't like it. Which probably means by the year 2090, we'll have our monster, and those people won't like it, but that's okay. We got to do something. But that was when we were all going to live with cars. We don't have sidewalks down here. It's not pedestrian friendly. The assumption was that you're just going to take your car wherever you go. And we built for that. And look what we have. We have Annandale out there. And you've got it in Route 1 in spades. So I'm going to talk about alternate metrics. That's what you're going to start with. And we had a meeting on this about 4 or 5 months ago. And I think one of the foundations of that is parking regulations. I know it's a hackneyed, you're tired of me talking about it. But I think Rachel kind of agrees with me. But it's going to become less car friendly now. There's other people out there that hate automobiles. They want to put them all in the crusher, and that's not going to happen. We're going to drive cars. Period. We're not all going to ride bicycles, but it's got to be less car friendly than we intended for it to be in 1953. I'm going to go mute because I've had enough.
We'll just say, I think that as we look at making place, all these other things we're trying to do here, analytic tools, assessment tools, things like that. These are things that it'll be helpful, I think, for us to have. The county, yes, of course, but also, the TAC here, as we try and, help understand and navigate what's going on. We've talked about that, with talking about different applications in different geographic areas and things like that. I think some of those outlines are there. So being able to look at some of these these alternate measures of effectiveness, and also looking for where they might make the the best application or the first application. There are places where level of service still applies, at least to some degree, maybe in a large degree, but not everywhere. And that's the thing here, is we're trying to be more informed and more targeted as we go forward there. Eric, do I think I see you about to say something? Nope. Okay.
No, but Kevin's being nice and quiet, but I can tell he wants to say something.
Yeah, you got that right. It would not be my topic. With frankly, I don't think it trumps service to underserved communities. I just see so many other topics out there that I would choose to bring before the BOS. And secondly, there's no way you're going to be ready to December or January for us to get up to speed on that. I think to have an informed discussion, maybe I'm wrong, but I think you're going to be well into 2023 before you could have an informed discussion on it. So, I would probably just dissent, to keep it short, brief.
Kevin, on that note, Michael Fairchild requests that he could go to the October 18 and to make the presentation about that topic. So that would be this is October, so this should be next month. Yeah.
Are we talking? Is that the bus service?
Yes. Yes.
And we got on the calendar for November. So it's available in October.
He requests to go on the October 18, and for November 15, the parking re-image project from Michael Davis. He requests to go for that November.
So actually,
they kind of switch play, yeah.
So they both independently requested to switch.
Yes.
One wants to go later, the other one wants to go sooner.
Yes.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad we're going to get Michael up before the TAC. Doesn't change my answer about which topic I'd go before the Board of Supervisors with, but that is good news. I'm glad to hear that, Calvin. Thank you.
there's a lot of work to be done on alternate measures of effectiveness. I think the county themselves, itself, FCDOT is wrestling with that. That's one of the reasons they're not ready to have that conversation until, December. Again, I think probably January, but, later this year, beginning of next. So Kevin, your point about 2023, absolutely. But I think it opens a discussion there and a learning experience. I think it'd behoove us, yes, to learn a little bit more about what the AMOE is, and in fact, Calvin, if there's some read-ahead materials we can provide the TAC about these measures here. I don't want to necessarily, although we could if we want, have a meeting to become more familiar with what these things are. That's not necessarily a bad idea, but I think that if there are things that we learn at any point, including, of course, from the the bus service conversation, if we feel it's urgent enough to bring to the Board of Supervisors, we can certainly do so. And either a letter, a resolution, or it could be something we actually raise briefly during our joint meeting with them. We don't have a firm laid out minute by minute agenda yet, so we certainly have time to put that together if we think that's a topic we want to actually raise.
Yeah. I mean, I just prefer to be, to dissent on it. I don't expect you guys, you've come to agreement with this with Chairman Alcorn, and that's fine.
Yeah.
Just mark me down as a dissenter on it.
Yeah.
I would add, assuming that we are going to go forward with that, it would seem to me maybe a good starting point would be an in-depth look at Mount Vernon and the Embark project down there, and how alternative methods were applied or how they weren't applied, and what could have been done differently with those goals in mind, because that project seems to be large enough to be significant enough to look at that alternative methods of effectiveness and what could have been done better, and what was done that was better. So just a suggestion as a starting off point.
No, I think it's
I think it's a very good suggestion, because I think that Route 1 is quite ripe, and it will change. It's committed to the BRT down there, so it's going to bump into all the things that Kevin's talked about access for disadvantaged communities and redevelopment and everything else. Pete's right in the middle of it, right in the middle of Route 1, as a matter of fact. That's it. And then the next one's going to be what they're doing up here on Route 7. But that's going to be a number of years away. But, this is the chance in these older neighborhoods like his and mine to look at this.
Yeah. But Kevin, you bring up an excellent point of what went right and what hasn't gone right. And we've learned a lot on that. And I don't know if FCDOT has started working on that, but I know we've raised those issues with some of them. Maybe Calvin could find out if they have done some. Well, I know they're still working on the turn lane analysis that's coming out maybe October, November. That was where we were trying to get them to not widen it quite so much. So it's probably not ready for prime time, but by looking at what they finally come out with, I think we'll be able to get a good idea of what did work and what didn't. But LOS ruled the day in most cases. However, both FCDOT and VDOT and the politicians and the locals really put together our own alternative modes of effectiveness and pushed for calming, speed limit reduction, more trees, undergrounding, a lot of stuff. And we made progress, but we're not there. But maybe in that December, January timeframe, maybe FCDOT would be ready to give us a thumbnail on that.
Even if we weren't doing alternative methods of effectiveness, that's a project that definitely should be coming before the TAC at some point, just to review it. It's a huge project, and one that would definitely be in our interest.
I think so, because it could be an example of exactly what you said, what went right and what didn't go right for other areas in the county. And I don't think too many people disagree that if Richmond Highway happened 10 years ago, it'd already be 13 lanes. If it happens 10 years from now, it would probably be not much bigger than it is now. But this project's been teed up and ready to go, so it's hard to stop a major project like this or even change it that much. But I think it'd be a great thing to work at. Interesting to really study it. I've lived it, but frankly, sometimes I'm too close to it.
So we've got October and November is set. So
Yep.
December, January, maybe.
Well, we do have topics, November, October, November, but we have in the past had 2 topics in an evening. It can get a little tight depending on what the topics are, but I think the the parking reimagined wouldn't necessarily have to take too long. It's a follow-up activity there. So maybe that's a November topic for Richmond Highway, a revisit there, or actually, I mean, we've talked about it, but I don't think we have gotten an in-depth Richmond Highway presentations. I think it is an excellent idea. I think it's an excellent idea to do that. But I would say probably no later than December, so that if in fact we have the joint meeting in January, we absolutely want to make sure we've had that Richmond Highway meeting beforehand.
I think that project is, it's probably more than one meeting, but taking your suggestion, Mike,
Mhm.
if it is that big, sneaking some of it into the November meeting could help preface the next meeting and make that more productive when we come back to it and say, here's what we don't know, or here's what we want to find out, to make a subsequent meeting much more productive. So I think your idea for November might work there.
Okay. How do we divide it up? Now, we'll lay aside for a moment whether they're able to come in. We'll get to that part, but how do we think we might want to divide it up then, with sort of a warm-up, as it were, in November and a more in-depth in December? Or just have them give us a presentation and see how it goes?
See how it goes. I mean, I'm very skeptical even in January that we're going to be ready to go before the BOS there, or wherever is it, the Transportation Subcommittee or the board?
This is the board. And, again, we're not going before, we're having a joint meeting with.
Yeah, all right.
Yeah, so, and that's big, because that means we don't have to put our presentation together. We just have to be, ready to contribute intelligently to a conversation with the two groups.
And that was one reason why, frankly, I thought we could go ahead and go, even though we and Fairfax County may not really be ready yet, because this is kind of the first shot out of the box. And basically, the way I took it was, if Ddot is coming out and they're going to be favoring these alternative modes or measures. If they were favoring it, then it would be good for us to be right there and go, we also agree that there needs to be changes from LOS in different places. But make it basically a joint, this is the future, this is where we see things changing. Even though we may not have the final product at the time. But basically support the Ddot movement, because they're supporting kind of what we've been pushing.
Well, I would maybe suggest you leave December open depending on what comes out in November, and if we're ready and they're ready to come back in December, we can do it with Mount Vernon. But I think right now you're just not going to know.
Okay.
Yeah. And we may, one option, not the most likely outcome, but one could be, we learn enough in November that we feel prepared for a conversation, in which case December we can look at something else. But if we do want to go in more depth, we have the opportunity. So no, Kevin, I think that's a good idea. And also, that's the kind of thing, if there's some other piece, some other components or whatever of a conversation that we want to be prepared for with the board, and we can do so. The priorities is something that, commissioners and supervisors can just bring up. It's kind of a round robin sort of thing. But do want to try and have a good portion, and Mr. Alcorn felt the same way, a good portion of the joint meeting focused on, that, that topic of substance that we could share.
This is a little more sensitive, Mr. Chairman, but, we've got 2 vacancies, effectively a third. And I don't know how many of the other members, may not be attending on a regular basis. We're kind of an underrepresented TAC or underserved, I don't know what the term is, but I don't know how much you would take that into consideration too before we go before the BOS.
Well, there's a lot of reasons. You can imagine many of them why it's preferable for us, and that's one of the reasons to have a joint meeting as opposed to making a presentation. But certainly 2 of the the openings I know supervisors looking at. One of them is from Mr. Alcorn's office. I know they're looking to fill the position there. I will mention that Christy Garden is not here this evening. She's apparently starting a doctoral program. And apparently one of her classes is every Tuesday. So we'll talk to her offline about that. Calvin, I saw your email, of course. I'll reach out to her, but as a minimum, we can never, watch these. Watch the tapes of the meetings here, and we can. I'll talk to her and maybe find some opportunity. Either later on a Tuesday, because we probably go later than their classes might. In some cases. Or have a conversation because otherwise we as a group are not going to get a chance to meet with her if she's not available any Tuesday. So we'd have to have either a work session on another night or something else. So we'll see how that goes.
Well, just to put a stake deeper in your heart, I mean, how close do we come to missing quorum tonight?
I think we're at what is quorum? Calvin, is quorum 5 or 6?
If we have everyone, I think would be 6.
But
Given that we have the 2 vacancy, so that would be what, 9? So it would be like 5.
5.
Yeah, so we close, yes.
So we had a reserve of 2 commissioners tonight then. So what I'm getting at is that I think maybe as early as next month, and Calvin will let us know, we are going to be going away from virtual and back to in person.
I think as long as the chairman of the board say that we still under the state of emergency, the county state of emergency, then we can continue to meet online until he says so.
Okay.
Yeah, but I believe every board committee that the board members involved, they are meeting in person. But we have an option, either to go in person 100% or online 100%.
Okay. Well, there you go. All my point was that if we did switch to in person, and we're having trouble with attendance virtually.
Right.
The attendance will drop, yes. In person. Maybe that's just a reason to keep going virtual as long as you can. I don't know.
I've noted that we've been allowed to continue going virtually. No objections here, and so appreciate the chairman of the board of supervisors' determination on that. So yes. Another piece of this, and I want to bring this back to the work plan a little bit here, and this will tie in with something I was going to bring it up to the chairman's remarks, but I think it's appropriate here as we talk about the meeting for the board of supervisors. AMOE is certainly not the only topic. It's it's one we're going to pursue right now, but also we have divided up our work plan into topic areas. We've talked about this. Pete, Roger, appreciate your efforts on the transit-oriented development activity there. I'm going to be doing some more outreach and research on the basically teleworking. Been watching articles there. We can all see what's what's happening. Traffic is returning in the morning, but there's still a lot of open office space in Fairfax and downtown. I'm still a federal employee, and there's a lot of telework going on in the federal government as well. The active Fairfax. Unfortunately, the two leads there were two commissioners that have resigned. So we'll need some some leadership there. That might be something that we decide to revisit here. It's getting late in the year, and so we haven't had an active Fairfax specific conversation, but we have had stuff that's related to it. And then Jeremy, about some of the the strategies there. I know that you looked before into sort of the status of the comprehensive plan. Wouldn't necessarily expect to have another update now, but I think that's something, if you could sort of reach out and see, maybe that's something that we can look at in these next couple meetings as well too, just to sort of make sure we're caught up a little bit as we meet with the board. So I don't know, Jeremy, is that something you can do for us? Appreciate that.
Yeah, I don't know when I talked to Mike, I connected with Mike, he didn't have a sense of when there would be another update other than there wasn't a current update, but I think that's been a couple months now, so I can try to figure out when there might be something.
Yeah, some, his thoughts on implementation, just sort of get a sense of how he sees the comprehensive plan fitting in, right now. And that actually, now leads me to the other part I wanted to mention here. And Pete and I talked with Calvin and Brent last week about sort of trying to keep up with some of the moving pieces. Each commissioner has their network. We find things out, we learn things, we come, we share them, things like that. But one of the sort of sources of information that we wanted to take better advantage of is, quite honestly, the fact that we've got Calvin every day in FC.Ddot sort of watching the trains go by, so to speak. And so what we'd like to start doing, and Calvin has started to put a spreadsheet together, and we'll keep developing it here, that as things happen in topics that we have identified in a work plan, or that we have had briefings about, and usually there's a correlation there. We rarely get a briefing that's not related in some way to the work plan. Any changes, any things going on that we can be aware of. I think we'll, we often say, hey, we'd like to have you come back. Well, I think we probably need to, do a little bit better tracking. So which groups we want to have come back, when, things like that. We do take some of those notes at the end of meetings, and I'm going to review some of my old meeting notes there. But Calvin has been kind enough, and he and Brent are going to work together to, sort of try and keep track of some major muscle movements, just so we can help get another sort of source of information and update there, so we can help keep up with things. So Calvin, very much appreciate your efforts there. If there's any observations you'd like to make, you're welcome to. And again, appreciate the draft there. Don't have to share it if you want to, or welcome to. I know Pete had a couple comments on it, and it's still early stages. But Calvin, again, if you any comments, you're at this point, you're welcome to dive right in.
I think it is still early, and I'll read it a little bit tomorrow. And just to let you know that we have started the conversation with Noelle, and she is going to talk to Tom. And I think that internally we're gonna have a meeting to find out, how we can get the information, to the TAC in a timely fashion.
Okay.
And we probably set up a process. So in the couple of weeks, I think that we probably set up a meeting probably with you and Noel and Tom and I and probably Brand or Marcus.
Okay.
So we can go over that and just let you know that she told me like before the meeting. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. That's
Yeah.
fantastic.
So
And, you know, very much like Pete to be able to be invited to that as well too. That's the advantage of that rule of three there. We can have two together, it's okay. By definition, three or more, you know, it's not a TAC meeting. So, but that'll be, Pete, if you're available, of course, you know, hope you can join the conversation. But that's very good to hear. That's very good to hear. I appreciate that.
Someone mentioned Noel. I don't know. I had to step away for a second, but at one of these meetings recently, I learned that Noel was promoted. So I was wondering, maybe Calvin, you'd like to tell everybody if you have.
yes, Noel. Previously, Todd Wickle was the division chief, and he retired after like some 30 years working for the county. And Noel has been promoted to take over Todd's position, and now she is the big boss. Yeah. So.
Who retired, Calvin?
Todd Wickle works.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
he has been with the county for over 30 years, and just recently he's been retired, and hopefully he will come back at a part-time or something like that, but they haven't worked it out yet. Yeah.
So that Noel is like, if not deputy, something close to deputy.
No. Tom is like on top at the director, and then under him there are 4 division, and she is one of the division chief. Yeah.
Okay, just like Lieutenant Colonel in the Fairfax County
Right,
Police Department. So I'll start calling her that, see how that goes over. Congratulations to her.
Thank you.
Well deserved, I think.
It is.
Yeah,
Yes.
very good.
Very.
Yeah, she's we know Noel very well, so it's good news. Definitely good news.
And she is
Good to
still
have friends in
doing
high places.
she's still doing her old job, and also be the I mean, she was still doing the liaison for the county, you know, represent the county at the at the
Richmond.
General Assembly meeting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the promotion definitely won't hurt her position down there. That should add to it. So.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
She doesn't have to go home and check with mama. So.
Or she's only got 1 heartbeat to check with now as opposed to 58. Yes, that'll help. That'll help.
She gets to keep that in her portfolio. They're not gonna backfill for that position.
It's very difficult to find somebody like Noel to, you know,
Yeah.
to fill that job. Yeah. It's like one of the county.
All right, no, appreciate that very much. And so, you know, each meeting we'll talk a little bit about preparing for the Board of Supervisors meeting. But this is productive here, so appreciate the efforts there to lay some things out. So, and we'll sort of wrap it up here in just a little bit to the other business and announcement section there. But I think that's all I wanted to go over with the joint meeting discussion. So unless there's any other questions or other discussion items, I'd like to move on to a brief discussion of the Transportation Achievement, the TAC Awards. And the presentation of the 2021 award, that's one of the things that we had considered doing with our joint meeting with the board. I think with the meeting now being delayed till January, that's no longer a good option for at least the 2021 award, maybe 2022. But for the 2021, Calvin, I think sort of some board meeting, some weekday morning, I think we do get in to be part of the morning cattle call, so to speak. You know, what we've done before. You know, and give that presentation. I know it's been a while, but the Scotts Run Trail Project folks, you know, they've been waiting a while, so it'd be nice to be able to, you know, finally give them the award.
Yes, I will work with I will find out a day for us to go to the board. Yeah.
Okay.
They've been very anxious to receive the award. Yes.
Yes, I can imagine. I can imagine, and, obviously, getting the plaque ready, et cetera, and stuff like that. Pretty straightforward, pretty obvious, but, just mention it. So if you could, let me know when the board meeting opportunities might be. Obviously, I'll want to be there. All commissioners are invited to come. And just want to sort of see what day it is. I think the board meetings are usually on a Tuesday or a Thursday.
It is on a Tuesday morning, yeah. I mean, yeah.
Okay,
Tuesday morning.
all right. Okay, I'm sure I can, well, don't worry, I recognize I'll have to accommodate my schedule for the boards. I'm just wondering which meeting it might be, but thanks, Calvin, for reaching out and finding out when that might be, when we might be get that on the calendar there. Okay, the selection of the 2022 award, I didn't mean we're going to make the decision tonight. After I wrote it, I realized that's a little misleading. As actually what I was talking about was the selection process. And if I'm not mistaken, didn't Christy Garten agree to be part of the Tac Award committee there? I can't remember now. All of a sudden, I'm blanking now on
Yes,
who our
we
two
did.
or three folks are.
She did, and that was after you let her out of the hammerlock you had her in. But yes, she agreed. Now that she's working on a PhD, that could be kind of tough. Go ahead and.
Well, it shouldn't take too long to do. Roger, I believe you had graciously agreed to be part of that 2022 committee. Am I dreaming that?
Battle-hardened veteran.
What's that?
I'm a battle-hardened veteran of doing.
You're a battle-hardened veteran. So,
no good deed goes unpunished. So I guess I shall.
So
I don't want to chair it again. We could let one of our newer members do that, but I'll carry a spear and.
Okay, and who was the third person there? Trying to remember now. I've got my notes.
Aha.
What's that?
Aha.
I think it was Jeremy because he was absent on the meeting, yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Of course. I was gonna say I would be I didn't have to do it last time, and so I was willing to volunteer, but I've been voluntold, so I'm
Yeah.
It's on the edge. It's on the edge. Oh, no, appreciate that. Jeremy, now that you've been, sort of thrown into the mix and voluntold, would you be willing to chair the group, which basically means to be in the meeting when the time comes?
Sure, happy to do it.
Appreciate that. Appreciate that. Have we put out the solicitation yet? I think it's or when do we do that? It's like I've never done this before. I apologize, Calvin, but when do we normally send out the solicitations?
We normally send it out like in June, July, and we were supposed to announce it at the meeting with the joint meeting with the board supervisor. Now we don't have one yet, so I can send out tomorrow or
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, because I think this is about the time we solicit. We want the nominations back by, was it basically mid-November, something like that? Because we want it to be for 2022, so you want to be able to, work through closer to the end of the year. So, in fact, I think it's probably appropriate to have the award given in 2023, so you can, have the award go through 2022. I remember in years past, we used to have the award winner come to our dinner. We aren't quite doing the dinner quite the same way, and I don't think that's a driver. But I would think make the announcement December, January for the award winner.
Okay, I'm sorry. So when do you like to have the due date? I mean the deadline for the nomination?
Okay. Well, commissioners, what do you think about having the 2022 award given in early 2023, the decision made in 2023? So what I'm thinking about is having the materials submitted by early to mid-December. We can make a decision in December, no later than January, and then make the award. A little bit different, I think, but also this maybe get us on a routine schedule. Any thoughts about that? Should we go sooner? We've kind of been all over the map a little bit in recent years.
I don't think you want to get too backed up, to giving the 2022 award and, 20, do you keep getting further and further behind?
This actually catches us up because
Okay.
if we give the 2022 award in 2023, and we might be able to do it at our joint meeting, perhaps, but it would be a month after 2022 has ended. Right now, we're 9 months after 2021 has ended, and we still haven't given out the 2021 award, which is faster than what we did with the 2020 award, but that was pandemic.
I'll leave it to the brain trust. I'm good with whatever, gets it done as expeditiously as possible.
I think early 2023 makes sense because then you're evaluating work for the entire year of 2022. There's no point in evaluating 2022 while it's still ongoing, even though there's only a month left in the year. I mean, you're evaluating a complete year of performance and projects and accomplishments, and that makes sense.
Okay.
Also support the idea of returning the finished, I guess you call them applications or whatever, by mid-December, and always give them a couple days extra, and then letting the team decide, over the next month. And then, we could announce it, in the first quarter, and if we get things always to get quickly together, we could even give the award in first quarter. But I think the main thing is to put out the notice, get them back, and get our team looking at them.
Okay.
I think last year we had some real good applications. It was one stood out, but I think that any one of the three applications could have qualified for the award under certain circumstances. And that's what we want, I think.
Well, I'm hoping there'll be two this year from Mount Vernon again.
Okay.
Two
We'll count
different.
on it.
Well, just from a timing, so say we put it out, if we got it out and the paper out this month, we'd get them back in November. We would need, the committee would need time to meet, but then this group would also need time to meet to approve the final. And so what date meeting could that happen? Could that happen in the December meeting? That'd be pretty soon to get the committee together.
Now we're back to sort of having the award really sort of through only part of 2022, although in effect the award comes from November of the previous year, let's say through November of the next year. Our TAC meeting in December is currently scheduled for the 20th. What we did last year is we bumped that up a week so that we aren't quite as close to Christmas. But our December meeting would be the 13th or the 20th of December. Our next meeting in January is the 17th. Don't know at this point when we might have that joint meeting with the board. It won't be on a Tuesday evening. I know that. So I think there's a good chance that we would have our joint meeting with the board after our January meeting, after the 17th. I think it's not likely, and I think we can try and push off a little bit. We'll try to have the joint meeting no earlier than sort of the end of January, which would then give us the opportunity in January 17th to make the selection, which means, Jeremy, that the committee would have to meet sometime between either late November, mid-December, whenever we close off the nominations, and then to make a recommendation to the TAC prior to the January 17th meeting. So it'd be a month, admittedly over Christmas and New Year's, but that could easily be done in early January.
Yeah, and I think the last year, what I remember, the committee just met at our on-site at the Mosaic District, right? There was just a separate meeting.
That's what we did.
Okay.
And if we're in person, we could certainly, meet a little bit before then, or even start the, the virtual meeting, we would, just announce that there's going to be a tax subcommittee, and we could even go executive session if we needed to, although I don't think there's too much attention on it. Well, how about make the announcement, Calvin, tomorrow, certainly by the end of September, that the Tac Award, we're soliciting nominations for the 2022 Tac Award. Nominations are due by December 15th, December 10th, I think. Get a little bit of time after Thanksgiving, squeeze a little more out of the year. And then if the committee convenes in early January, that means if somebody doesn't get it through until December 20th or January 3rd, there's still a chance to get it in. We're not going to announce that, but it does give a little extra time if we need it. Okay.
Okay, that sounds good. So December 15, right? Or you want 16 is a Friday?
Okay. 16th.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. And if we have a meeting the week before, we'll just see how many nominations we've gotten. If it's the 20th, we'll see how many nominations we got. So, okay. Great. And Calvin, I believe a couple years ago, we put together the criteria for the TAC Award. So we can put that in the announcement. Do you have that? Do we need to resurrect that from the file somewhere?
I have that somewhere in the file. Yes, I have that.
Okay. If you could dig it out and show it to me just to track it there. I'm sure it's the same one, but just to be appreciate it. Okay. Okay. So great. That's the 2022 TAC Award plan. So fantastic. All right, moving on to the next topic on the agenda, public comment period. Are there any members of the public here that would like to speak? I think I recognize all the names and faces here. So unless seeing none, let's move on to the other business and announcements. I think we can go through here fairly quickly. We've talked about the October 2022 TAC meeting. Very pleased to be able to move the bus services up in October. At this point, I think we can not add another topic on the agenda. We'll talk a bit about the our joint meeting with the board. Maybe something comes up if we need it there. And plus, I know sometimes we do get requests for topics, so we'll just leave that with the bus services in October. November is follow up on the parking reimagined and the Richmond Highway update in November. And Pete, if you'd like to help work with Calvin on what that's going to be about and stuff like that, feel free, just to sort of tee it up there. But I think we're just looking at a general status at this point. But if there's some areas that you want to make sure we focus on, and this is a sort of as a tutorial is not quite the right word, but sort of a reintroduction or and maybe in some cases an introduction of the TAC to what's going on there, some of the history of it, how we got where we are, and the decisions that have been made and where we're at. We can certainly ask questions, and this is, Kevin, back to your point about preparing for the AMOE conversation. We can ask questions definitely about sort of, the AMOE-ishness of what they did. We can ask about that.
Well, it may be that FC-Ddot and the turn lane analysis may be done by then.
Okay.
It may be also that the BRT, I think they call themselves the Executive Council. It meets on September 30 again. It might be by November that they have some final reports on this stuff.
Okay.
So we might be able to even, invite somebody from that group to give us a 10-minute update. But I know that Parking Reimagined is already coming to the area.
Okay.
And they could also be folded in.
Yeah. Well, we've got that on the agenda, a little follow-up there, Michael Davis. So yes, there's going to touch a number of things, and that's got some crossflow already, so that would be good.
Yeah, and Kevin's buses to underserved areas definitely is a side issue on this too, because we are, as everybody knows, we're one of the places that underserved as it is. But that's changing with BRT, but we're not there yet.
Yeah.
So,
Well, we'll be all locked and loaded with that after the October presentation there.
Yeah.
And then there may be some other things we can do after that.
so yeah, so up at Calvin and I, if he wants to, we can definitely work together, because there could be some really meaty stuff out by November.
Okay. All right.
Yes, yeah, please let me know, who to contact, or, or the area interest of yours. I can, try to find some people, but I think that the raw one is the Ddot project, so we have to invite somebody from Ddot. That was the last time I'm talking to
Yeah.
staff. Yeah.
It's commingled. Basically, the southern portion's mostly VDOT, the northern portion's FC-Dot, and
Okay, I
FC-Dot's
see.
doing most of the BRT. So, they definitely commingled. So,
Right. Yeah.
but I think the biggest report's going to be coming out, commingled BRT, the lane analysis, and that's FC-Dot and VDOT.
Okay.
And hopefully they'll be done by then.
So what's the November meeting right now? I'm sorry, I lost.
Sure, no problem. November meeting is follow up on the parking reimagine project and Richmond Highway update.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. And Jeremy, as you talk to Michael about comprehensive plan, if there's something there worthy of 5-10 minutes, 20 minutes, let me know, and we can try and squeeze that in as well too. We can talk about that if we need to. So, okay.
That's good.
And as I look at the agenda here, what do I see? Richmond Highway Safety Speed Study. That's already on the list here. So,
And that could be coming out by year's end.
Yes. So yeah, we'll now it's appropriate to be a little bit more immersed in Route 1 given the conversations we're having. That's okay. So there's the agenda items for October and the rest of 22 for now. So on the chair's report, we talked about the tracker there. Again, thank you, Calvin, for putting that together. Look forward to the meeting there. Other thing I'll mention is Confederate Names Task Force. I did just see where the board has selected the new names for Lee Jackson Memorial Highway and Lee Highway. It's Route 29 and Route 50. So they went with the basics. So those they've made that determination. So just wanted to mention that.
Mike, did I blank on December too? I didn't think you did. You have a topic for December?
December is potentially, we don't have it laid out yet, but the top candidate for December is Richmond Highway Update Overflow.
Okay.
So we come back to Richmond Highway in December. We can do that. Plus, we'll certainly be preparing for the joint meeting of the Board of Supervisors. By then, it's almost certainly to be scheduled if we're going to do it in January. And so we'll talk about that a little bit as well.
I wasn't a big fan of the name changes, but if you're going to do it, Fairfax County did it better than Arlington. So going with the numbers, I think, makes a lot of sense if you're going to do it.
It was the top recommendation for change from each of the groups there. There are a couple of names in there. I mean, I had one name that I had sort of thrown in the mix there, but the board apparently was clearly not in the mood to really pick any names. They just wanted to be, when I say play it safe, I mean that safe. I mean that respectfully. There's no sense rocking the boat here.
Yeah.
So they just wanted that. Yeah. So, okay.
Mike, wasn't there a second option on the Richmond Highway, December thing?
Mhm.
If there was some update on the AMOE, they might come in, wasn't it?
An AMA
A pre-
update related.
like a preview, so that we would be,
That's actually, you know what? That's a good suggestion there. Just to get ourselves warmed up, we could use a preview
Yeah.
of AOE and LOS and things like that. I also noted, I just was recalling, we've had Rachel Flynn join us for meetings 2 years in a row. In each case, it's been November, just coincidental. But if we're doing an AMOE, et cetera, tutorial in December, that might be a good meeting to have her join us on that. And also, that if we do that meeting in person, that could be something we can then have a social event afterwards where we stop talking work and start drinking beer or whatever your beverage of choice is. So
Definitely something stronger.
clearly, so we're going to need that for a long year. So just
if that's a motion, I second it.
exactly, yeah. Vote on your favorite alcohol.
Yes.
So yes, and I'll reach out to Rachel on that about an AMOE preview. So thanks for the reminder there. That another good idea. We talked about that. I think that's time well spent.
Yeah, if it's in December, ask her if she's buying after the meeting.
Maybe one round. After that, it's our turn to buy for her. So, okay. That's what I've got right now. Actually, let's go to commissioners' updates. Actually, one thing I would, Kevin and Pete at the end would like to hang on and have one quick conversation with you. It'll still be on sort of after the meeting's over, but I did just want to loop back on something. But we'll do that. But with that, let's go to commissioners' updates, and let me go through the list in the same order that we called your names. So Kevin, anything you'd like to add to the mix, sir, tonight?
Well, first of all, I'm disappointed that none of my fellow commissioners are wearing black like I am to continue the mourning period for the Queen, but such that it is. Well, all right, Roger, I'll give you partial credit, just like for the trees. We have that option.
0.75.
I got dark blue.
No, sorry, gotta be black. But the other thing is, even though I just apologized earlier to Calvin for sending articles in the middle of meetings, I sent one to be forwarded to everybody if you hadn't seen it in the Metro section of the Post today. The headline's a little bit leading. I think it talks about not being under WMATA not being under as much financial stress as they had feared. But it talks about, trying to deal with the people working from home, different ridership projections. So that the meat of the article, I think, was there were some interesting observations to be had. So Calvin will be forwarding that to you at some point. I recommend it. And that is all I have.
That was in today's paper?
Yeah, it is in today's Metro. I think it's the lead story in today's Metro section, if I'm not
Okay,
mistaken.
I haven't thrown it out yet, so I can take a look.
I just forward the email, yeah.
Thank you, Calvin. Oddly, when you search the Washington Post, their search engine, it just leaves a lot to be desired, because if you put it in by relevance, you have to keep scrolling down. When I put in by date, all I got was stuff completely unrelated to WMATA. So go figure.
Okay. All right. Well, all the more reason to send the article. So thanks for doing it. Next is Pete Sitnick's brother, Roger Sitnick. Sorry, Roger Hoskin. Sorry.
Thank you. September 2nd was the usual bi-monthly meeting of the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments Access for All Committee. And they had a presentation there that I think we should entertain for a meeting at some point. And these are what they call equity emphasis areas. And this might be kind of an interest to Kevin. We identify small geographic areas with higher concentrations of 4 groups compared to the regional average. low income, Black or African American, Hispanic or Latino, and Asian, and helps us to understand the impact of transportation improvements on these areas compared to the remainder of the region. Bus service again. COG and TPP has also endorsed the use of these areas to help highlight areas of the region to consider with additional sensitivity when developing plans, policies, and programs. This particular methodology is likely to be adopted by COG and the Transportation Planning Board. Doesn't necessarily mean we have to do it. But I think it might behoove us to have a tutorial on this, because if it is adopted, somebody may ask us about it. And we don't want to sit there and say, what? We should know, at least know what it is, particularly if your supervisor asks you about it. You know, Mike, what do you know about equity emphasis areas? Who? We better know. And if you look at the county, or the MEMCOG area, we do have, most of it where you might imagine is in BC and PG County, but we have them in Fairfax as well. And Pete, a lot of them are in your area down Route 1, and a lot of them are in the Mesa District, and some of them are in Jeremy's district, the census tracts of equity emphasis areas. And equity emphasis is one of the criteria that the Board of Supervisors is going to use. And now they're going to have this methodology. So I would recommend at some point that we have a brief tutorial on this. And I've asked them if they could do it. They said yes. So this would probably be a virtual meeting, since the guy who runs this is probably in Maryland. But if you're interested, we could do that sometime next year. And I hope this would be a brief presentation. In MCOG meetings, we go through 6 to 8 agenda items in a 2-hour meeting. So this is a runaway freight train. We wouldn't spend a lot of time. But I think it's more a matter of familiarizing ourselves with what this is and the methodology. So at least we can say we know what it is. Somebody asks us.
You might invite the subject matter expert from COG to sit in on the October meeting.
That was
at least attend.
I could do that.
Yeah.
She is available for that. But if you're interested, let me know. I think.
Let me go one further potentially. Not to make a commitment on the spot, but Roger, I am intrigued by what you've just suggested here, and Kevin, picking up on what you just said. Maybe we have them come to present it in October, prior to the bus service presentation. So you know,
that I could give him a call and see if he'd be. This is a canned presentation, but whether he would be available on that night, or they could send somebody. I could ask.
Well, I don't think you want to bump like Feshlow, do you?
Beg pardon?
No, we don't. What I want to do is do them both.
This should be fairly short. Well, if it's more than 20 minutes to a half hour, it's too long, because I'm looking at the slides here for this, and there are, well, okay, there's 10, 11, 12, 13 of them. Cut it down. But I'm thinking of it more as educational and a tutorial for us. So we at least know what it is and how it's used. Because this methodology might be adopted by Fairfax County. It's certainly going to be adopted by MCOG. And I said, I just want us to be familiar with it. Know what it is, know what it's for. And somebody asks us about it, we can say, yes, we know what it is, we know what it's for, and this is how it works. Whether we want to integrate it into our work plan or not is a decision we could make later, or it may be something the Board of Supervisors say, well, we're going to do this, you know. But it is one of the areas that we're looking at is equity emphasis. And
well,
it is.
The other option is you could put him in touch with Michael, and they could decide among them, between the two of them, how to make the best use of the October meeting.
Or whenever. I can do that. If you're amenable to that, Mike, I can have
well, if we could, can we see the brief? Do you have a copy of the briefing?
I do.
Because what I'm thinking is just to understand a bit about it. I hear you loud and clear, and it does sound very intriguing. But what I'd also like to do though is I don't want to put Mike in a situation where he needs to sort of negotiate with somebody else for what he wants to present. But I do want to complement it where it fits. As a minimum with the briefing, we are going to be more aware than we were otherwise. So that is one threshold there. Kevin, we absolutely could invite the COG person to join us. We've talked about having outside participants in meetings, and so no objection to that. If we think it'd be helpful for the TAC to have a 15-minute discussion about the equity emphasis areas, kind of like what they did in the COG meeting, as you say, if they do 6 or 8 topics in 2 hours, they're moving pretty quickly. So if we do COG speed, unlike TAC speed, COG speed, we could probably have that presentation. And Michael Feschlow could be part of that, and certainly he can talk to the COG person before he chooses to do so.
I can send you the links to this because it's on their website, and they actually have an active link here for the methodology, which is a pretty long thing. Transportation planning areas, fairness and accessibility, environmental justice and equity emphasis areas. That's a meeting right there. But I think I just basically want us to be familiar with it.
Yeah. Because one of the other pieces here is, sort of environmental equity, environmental justice, et cetera, pretty broad topic related to underserved areas. But we're really, I think, looking at sort of the economic opportunity piece. Kevin, correct me if I'm wrong, with the bus conversation there. So it might not be as tight a fit as we might be thinking. But let's look at the presentation and see.
Okay.
And Kevin, sorry, go ahead, Roger.
What I'll do is I'll send you the link to the, if I can do this. This is kind of above my, well, I'll work on it again.
Well, send it to Calvin. Send the link to Calvin. He'll
and then
it out.
y'all can take a quick look at it.
Right.
And but that was my objective in bringing it up to the TAC.
Okay. No, I appreciate that, and I'd welcome the views of any commissioners on how they think it best to incorporate this. But Kevin, particularly you, what your thoughts are after you look at the presentation, how you think the best way, most efficient way to proceed is. Because what I don't want to do is take away the focus that you've long been championing on the bus service there. But if it's absolutely complimentary, then I very much want to do it. But if it ends up being a bit of a distraction, then I want to be.
That's fine. I was doing it more as an educational thing, but it does fall into Kevin's area of interest, which is this equity emphasis. And apparently the whole MCOG is taking this very seriously. And most of the equity emphasis areas are in Southeast DC and PG County. So go ahead.
Pete.
I had just one concern and thought, and that is, it sounds interesting. I'd like to learn, but I wonder if Fairfax County already has somebody or some group working on how they're going to respond to what we just talked about.
That's entirely possible. And that's why I didn't want those people to filter back and say, okay, TAC, what do you know about this? And we say, oh, I've never heard of it.
Okay.
Say, oh, yes, we've heard of it. This is what it does. I mean, blah, 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 blah. I mean, if you don't, it looks like you just haven't done your homework.
Not arguing. I agree. I just don't want to duplicate something they're already doing.
Exactly. I would send that link, Roger, to Michael as well, Feschlow, and for his reaction.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know there was, I think, one Fairfax, I think was the equity initiative that Fairfax did a couple years ago. So we, and in fact, Calvin, if you could, as you pass the link to Michael Feschlow, seeing if he's interest, our one Fairfax, FC.1 Fairfax connection. I want to be a little careful because I don't want to just sort of send things just to send things. Let's just have a look at it. Let's have a look at it.
Okay.
And see. I think I'm 90% sure we will send it to Michael Feschlow, but I think it'd be nice to be able to say, when we do send it to him, hey, thinking of maybe pairing this with your presentation or just FYI. So
and then he comes back and says, oh, I'm working with these people all the time.
He might.
Great.
Yeah.
That would be
So Kevin, have a look at, I'm pointing mostly at you because of the topic area, but I really mean all commissioners. Have a look at it. If you can, let me know what you think about where you think it fits in, and then we'll target it accordingly. But at least we've got it, so thanks, Roger.
Okay.
I'm sorry, what, Michael, are we talking about?
What I was going to suggest is that right now, once Roger sends the equity emphasis areas brief from MCOG, just send it to the TAC for now. What we'll do is we'll have a look at it, and then we will almost certainly send it to Michael Feschlow. But when we do, it's going to be with a comment, either, hey, we saw this, look kind of interesting, we're thinking of pairing you with this, or, you know, whatever, because again, one of the things maybe that it's not closely enough related to the bus activities, in which case we say, hey, we saw this, wanted you to be aware.
Yeah. What do you know about it? I mean,
Yeah. Exactly.
Oh, okay. You mean Michael Feldchow, right?
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
Yeah,
But
okay,
not
okay,
until not until we've had a chance to huddle up a little bit. Again, I'm pointing a lot at Kevin, but I'm talking to everybody about your thoughts on pairing with Michael's bus presentation and just how you think it fits in. So if you have the opportunity, we'd appreciate it. Okay.
Yeah, and I think that he requests me to rename his presentation as let me see what it's called. He requests me to rename this that bus service planning for equality and employment center. So he put the word equality in there, so he might be aware of that. Yes.
Absolutely.
Or something. Yeah.
Yeah. It sounds very similar, but let's have a look first. But
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
absolutely. Okay. Okay. Roger, that it. Appreciate it. Excellent suggestion. Roger's brother Pete Sitnick.
I have nothing other than, should I move? I can't do it yet. Go ahead.
Okay.
I think we have Eric left.
Yeah, I think Eric's got it.
Well, yeah, actually, and you know what? We're going to move you to the end as we used to do, so you can make the requisite motion. So we'll come back to you. So hold that thought.
I've got it.
Because we do have a couple other folks to go through. So thank you for the reminder. Let's see. Next, Jeremy, anything to add, sir?
Nothing for me. Thanks.
All right, appreciate it. Eric, any comments?
Nope. Thank you.
All right, now to our esteemed vice chair for any other comments and to make the requisite motion.
I have no comments other than I've moved that we adjourn.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded that we adjourn at 10 o'clock sharp PM. Any debate on the motion? Hearing none. All those in favor of adjourning, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. Meeting is adjourned at 10 PM. Kevin and Pete, if you can hang on for just a sec, real brief. Eric, Roger, Jeremy, thanks so much.
Good night, everybody.
Okay.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Well, not everybody. We still
Not
got
everybody, but.
these bodies.